In the dead of night, a $1.2 billion Russian ammunition train vanished in a flash, an inferno sparked by a Ukrainian drone ambush deep within the Siberian forest. Deep inside the frozen Siberian expanse, a covert military operation unfolded, a strike Russia never saw coming. A billion-dollar lifeline of weapons, heavily guarded and deemed untouchable, was cornered, blinded, then torn apart in a maelstrom of advanced drones. Thermite and fire cascaded through its length. What started as a silent infiltration by freezing Russian partisans soon erupted into one of the most precise and devastating Ukrainian strikes of this war, an attack that delivered a critical blow to their modern warfare capabilities. It did not just annihilate a massive weapons shipment, it crippled an entire front line. It forced the Kremlin into a strategic crisis. This is the inside story. How a handful of soldiers, a swarm of drones, and a perfectly executed plan of modern warfare brought a $1.2 billion Russian war machine to its knees. Its consequences will shape the battlefield for weeks to come. This is that military update. Today, at 3:17 a.m., a Russian ammo train valued at $1.2 billion became a funeral pyre in the Siberian forest. Car after car erupted, a chain of detonations illuminating the night sky. The destruction of these modern weapons severed a key rail artery, starving an entire Russian front of its ammunition flow. It marked one of the most decisive acts of sabotage in this global conflict. This was no accident. It was a meticulously timed strike, a textbook example of asymmetric warfare, a coordinated effort between Russian partisans, Ukrainian special operators, and a swarm of advanced drones. Defense technology engineered for one purpose: to cripple Russian logistics, to impose severe financial and operational costs across the entire army. The Kursk sector was the target. For 6 hours, 3 Russian partisans from the Freedom of Russia Legion endured the biting cold, hunkered down in a snow pit just 80 feet from the tracks. They were the trigger for this entire defense operation. Bodies numb, faces raw with frostbite. But these troops held their position. They knew the cost of failure. At 3 a.m., the static of an encrypted radio broke the silence. The Ukrainian team, monitoring the skies miles away, delivered a single update. The drone swarm was 3 minutes out. Target approaching strike point. A war analysis in real time. 18 miles away, 5 Baba Yaga hexacopters skimmed the treetops. Each carried a specialized warhead, a product of advanced defense systems. Launched from a disguised cargo vehicle, they hugged the terrain, flying just 15 feet above the forest floor. Their route was pre-programmed, skirting Russian radar fields, exploiting one of the few known blind zones in the region's surveillance net. These drones were the hammer of the Air Force. The partisans on the ground were the bait. A headlight pierced the fog. The partisans felt the vibration through the frozen earth. This was the Kremlin's prized mobile arsenal, a rolling fortress, 50 freight wagons long. Inside, thousands of 152mm artillery shells, crates of Grad rockets, high-value S-300 air defense missiles. The shipment's destruction would trigger a catastrophic supply deficit. It would erase a vast quantity of ammunition, starving the Russian soldiers on the front lines before dawn even broke. The locomotive screamed into the kill zone. The partisan leader gave his final confirmation into the radio. He signaled his men. Thermite charges flared to life, hurled at the cold steel. A fierce crosswind threatened to derail the entire plan. The molten fire was pushed off course, but in the final second, it caught. The thermite clung to the rails. The trap was set. The steel glowed incandescent, liquefying at temperatures over 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The military train slammed into the breached section of track. A shriek of tortured steel tore through the night as the locomotive ceased, grinding to a violent halt under its own immense weight. Freight cars buckled. The impact thundered across the frozen woods. Seconds later, the forest erupted with the angry swarm of drone rotors. On station, Russia's Nebo-M radar complex, a multi-million-dollar defense system, saw nothing. Its powerful beam was calibrated for high-altitude threats from a hostile air force, not for drones weaving between tree trunks. To the radar operators, the scopes were clear. Their first alarm was the panic shouts of the troops on guard. Machine guns erupted in a deafening chorus. PKM gunners stitched the darkness with streams of green tracers, firing blind at the sound of the approaching modern weapons. In a command bunker, a Russian army colonel slammed his fist on a console. His barked order activated the Krasuka-4 electronic warfare system. A massive electromagnetic pulse radiated across the rail yard, a bubble of raw RF energy, a hallmark of modern warfare. It was designed to fry drone circuits on contact. One drone fell, its feed dissolving into static, but the remaining 4 pressed the attack. 3 were AI-guided hunters. They operated on visual targeting, immune to the jamming. The 4th, a Slava 7, was hardline, tethered by fiber optic cable to its operator. The jammer was useless against this piece of defense technology. The first kinetic strike came seconds later. Tracers found an AI drone, tearing it apart in midair. The soldiers cheered, but 2 hunters and the tethered drone pressed on. The Russian defense shifted, establishing a kill box. Gunners synchronized, their fire saturating the approach corridor. The remaining drones split. A coordinated pincer movement, a classic warfare tactic. One drone drew fire, acting as a decoy. The other 2 went low, skimming through the chaos. The lead AI hunter identified a critical vulnerability. The joint between 2 S-300 missile carriers, a direct hit could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. It would annihilate the high-value weapons. Defying its flight plan, it broke formation. It entered a terminal dive. Gunners converged their fire. They shredded it, just feet from its target. This global conflict update was getting intense. The near miss shocked both sides. But in the chaos, the Russian troops forgot the ground team. The partisan leader moved, pulling a magnesium flare. He ignited it. A blinding sun erupted in the night, washing out the gunner's vision. His men moved, hurling their final thermite charges onto the freight cars. New fires bloomed across the train. With the defenders blinded, the partisans sprinted for their exfil vehicle, melting into the tree line. The Ukrainian drone operator saw his window. He identified Freight Wagon 34, packed with Grad rockets. The command was given. The remaining AI hunter plunged through the flare-lit smoke. The Russian soldiers fired wild, their eyes useless against the dazzling glare. The drone struck Wagon 34, its shape charge piercing the steel. The effect was instantaneous. The Grad rockets didn't just detonate. They launched. The wagon became an unguided sideways rocket battery, spewing, burning projectiles in every direction. The forest caught fire. Adjacent wagons buckled. The Slava 7 drone now plunged into the firestorm. Its optical feed went white-hot, but its trajectory was locked. Target, Wagon 22. A container packed with stacked 152mm artillery shells. Less than a second later, it impacted. The detonation was catastrophic. Wagon 22 ceased to exist in a colossal detonation. A 150-foot pillar of fire tore through the night. The shockwave buckled steel and crushed vehicles. Molten debris rained down hundreds of yards away. The weapons and ammunition lost in those 2 strikes alone represented a catastrophic blow. Hundreds of millions of dollars in military assets vaporized. Secondary explosions echoed, a deadly chorus compounding the loss. A chain reaction had begun. It spiraled out of control. Mortar rounds cooked off. Missile containers ruptured. Entire wagons were ripped apart by the unfolding modern warfare. The sequential blasts were relentless. Russian soldiers abandoned their positions, fleeing into the darkness as the train became something else. It was a mile-long corridor of fire and exploding steel. By sunrise, the scale of this military update was brutally clear. More than 40 freight wagons obliterated. Over 1,500 tons of munitions were reduced to ash and twisted metal, modern weapons now useless. A loss valued at well over $1.2 billion. The rail line itself, a critical artery for this war, was severed. Repairs would take a minimum of 48 to 72 hours. For 3 days, nothing would move. No ammunition, no troops, no fuel. For the Russian army on the Kursk front, already stretched thin, it meant immediate crisis. Their artillery batteries would soon fall silent. Planned offensives would stall before they began. This war analysis confirms the operational blow was magnified by the financial injury. Destroyed weapons, crippled infrastructure, ruined support assets. Russia's defense had sustained a loss of well over $1 billion. All in a single night. The official military news from Moscow claimed it was a weather-related accident. But satellite intelligence and local footage exposed the truth before dawn. This global conflict now presented Russia with an impossible dilemma: secure the front, or pull its precious air defense systems back from Ukraine to guard its own interior. Every S-400 brought home. To defend Siberia became a new gap for the Ukrainian Air Force and its drones to exploit with lethal precision. Ukraine and its allies had forced the Kremlin to weaken its own modern warfare posture. For the volunteers involved, this was more than strategic. It was personal, a debt that had to be repaid. This was not a victory of overwhelming numbers. It was asymmetric warfare, executed with cold precision. The Russian military had fielded a billion-dollar asset, a train laden with weapons, protected by multi-million-dollar radar and high-end defense technology. In response, Ukraine used a handful of custom drones, thermite charges costing mere hundreds, and a small group of determined troops operating behind enemy lines. The result was decisive: a shattered supply artery, a starved front line, losses that the Russian war machine could not easily replace. The Siberian forest still glows with embers, and in that wreckage lies a clear reality. Ukraine's ingenuity and sustained pressure continue to outmaneuver and financially drain the entire Russian military effort. The strain on its ability to sustain large-scale warfare is growing, and this was only the beginning.